This experience was the worst I have ever heard about Merazine. It all started out about midnight. It was a sucky autumn night, chilly and all. I heard from a guy at the bus stop whom I told I liked to trip DXM that I should try Merazine. He told me to take a whole box of the stuff, but I thought that 12 pills was a bit much, so I looked up Merazine dosage on the internet. It said for my body weight and a first timer to take between 4 and 8, so I took 6. About an hour later, I experienced a drastic mood change. My emotions hit the highest point I've ever experienced on a legal drug, much like morning glories actually. Then it all hit rock bottom. About 2 a.m., I forgot I took any of them at all. I looked at the box and it looked unopened to me, so I thought I must have dreamed the whole emotion thing. Anyway, I opened the box up for the second time and pulled out the sheet of those little pills. It looked full. I saw 12 tiny little white pills in there. So I took out 6 and popped them. About an hour later, I was so messed up that I couldn't think straight. My brain felt as though it was no longer there. Then the hallucinations hit me. I looked at the ceiling and it started to dance around. Not the kind of dancing you want, mind you. It looked as though it was melting on me and it scared the crap out of me. I turned on the TV for a while and I can't even remember what was on. I believe that I was watching Xena or something. Anyway, my vision turned black and I became dizzy. I fell into some sort of trance, and even though my eyes were closed, I could still see my room and the TV. I think that the Merazine forced my third eye chakra to open, which in itself could be very dangerous. Anyway, I got up to go to the bathroom like every half hour. I looked in the mirror and my pupils were the size of marbles. I literally couldn't see any color in my eyes. When I went back into my room, I was laying in bed and I picked my hand up and looked at it. Remember the jiggling on the ceiling? Well, my hand started jiggling, and at first it looked cool. Then I got scared when I started seeing a clear jelly around my arms. Next thing I knew, these intricate bacteria-looking things began growing out of the jelly. I freaked out majorly and I couldn't help but keep staring. It was as if I had no control over my body. Sometime during this experience, I felt as though I stopped breathing. I became unnerved by this and it literally scared the crap out of me. I thought I was going to die and I regretted the experience totally. I got out of my bed finally and took my eyes off my body and the thing stopped growing. Then I turned around and looked in my bed where I had been laying. There was the jelly again. Only this time it looked like mold grew on it, rapidly too. It seemed like only seconds had gone by with each full growth. I ran through the house yelling for my grandma, who had no idea what was going on, to get up. I made up this story about a girl at work putting it in my drink and telling me after the fact that she had put it in someone's drink but was not specific as to who. I told her that I was having horrible hallucinations of viruses and bacteria, etc. She became frightened as well. She went in the other room to talk to my grandpa, and as I was sitting in the living room, I saw The Simpsons appear on the wall and I was watching as though it was a TV show. That was the high point of the trip. Next thing I knew, we were on our way to the hospital, and I don't really remember the events leading up to it other than my mom being called and told to meet us there. In the emergency room, things mellowed out. They didn't pump my stomach because the ingestion happened too long ago. The nurse and the doctors all had never heard of a Merazine overdose, and nobody even seemed to know what Merazine even was. Anyway, they hooked me up to a heart monitor, and I became freaked out again as I realized that my heart was not beating normal. According to the monitor, my heart rate all across the chart was a steady pyramid when it should have been spiky and different sized. They drew my blood and tested me for drugs, etc. I came up clean, luckily, because I hadn't done anything for a long time. Anyway, I started feeling like I was going to puke, so they gave me one of those gold plastic things. I started to move it around and I saw gold powder appear and I started to play with it. My mom started yelling at me to stop saying that. There was nothing there, but it was as if I didn't hear her. To me, it was there, and that's all I would believe. It amazed me how I couldn't separate reality from unreality. With LSA and LSD, I could always separate the two. Anyway, they let me go home at about 7 a.m. and I went to my mom's house. I was still hallucinating at this point, and heavily. I began to see spiders and bugs crawling all over the couch and I flipped out. It was as if I was having a nervous breakdown or something. Everyone tried to convince me that it was all in my head, but I just wouldn't listen. Finally, about 12 noon, I fell asleep for about 2 hours. When I awoke, I began hallucinating immediately. I saw a little girl standing next to my mom's work desk. I began to talk to her, asking her what her name was and what she was doing there. She told me that my mom was babysitting her, and I believed her. When I got up to get a closer look at her, she just disappeared. Weird, I thought. So I went and sat down on the couch. Then I saw a woman leaning over my little sister, and then her brother and sister, who weren't in the house and I knew it, appeared next to her. Finally, she disappeared, and so did the ghost kids, as I call them today. By this point, I was beginning to gain control of the trip. I figured out that if I closed my eyes and imagined an object appearing and being solid, when I opened my eyes, I would see it and I could pick it up and play with it. This is when the trip became a bit more fun. I created safety pins and tweezers, a thermometer, and a computer which I proceeded to play with until I got bored. Then all the hallucinations disappeared and I felt very drained. As a matter of fact, I felt almost as drained as I do when I crash on ephedrine. Anyway, the hallucinations gradually subsided and I returned to normal by 8 p.m. that night. For a trip that was supposed to last 4 to 6 hours, it lasted almost 24. All in all, I would say that Myrcene is very dangerous. Physically, it blocks histamines and has strong anticholinergic effects. Mentally, it induces a kind of psychosis where you can't separate real from unreal, and you also feel things that you shouldn't be feeling. For example, you can feel pain from your hallucinations. Finally, spiritually, it can do much more harm than help. Forcing open the third eye chakra, for example, can bring highly unwanted visuals into your everyday life. Also, you could lose faith completely simply because you can't tell what is real and what isn't. Generally speaking, I wouldn't mess with Myrcene ever again if my life depended on it. It's too much of a risk. Oh boy, it's been a long time since I did this stupid thing. Benzydamine, brand name Tantum, was available without prescription back then. We have seen some trip reports on the internet and want to try the psychedelic demon pill. We were young, dumb, and full of energy, and a box of Tantum was like $1. So one day I got some beers and decided to get Tantum from a local pharmacy. We bought 3 boxes of Tantum each containing 20 pills at 50 milligrams. We chugged the beers in an hour or so and decided to swallow 20 pills each at once. We have done this before, but on much lower doses. We could barely call it a trip. Most common effect of Tantum is seeing trails behind moving objects. After 30 minutes or so, we were just waving our hands to see some trails to be sure that if it was kicking in or not. After 45 minutes to an hour later, trails were happening with every object, and it looked like that scene from The Matrix where Neo was dodging bullets by leaning back. Some mild hallucinations of shadows were happening too, but it wasn't that noticeable. After 1.5 hours or so, the hallucinations were getting stronger, but these hallucinations caused by Tantum is not like acid or shrooms. It was happening outside of my focus, so every hallucination was on the corner of my eye, and when I moved my focus to the hallucination, it disappeared. As I said, we were dumb. What is the point of taking hallucinogens if you can't watch them? Those hallucinations were mostly shadows or some small animals like rats or snakes. The more objects in the room, the more hallucinations were happening, and our living room was full of trash. 2 hours later, the effects stay the same and the paranoia kicks in for everyone else, and it is the worst part of this substance. We all know it, but we still do it. It's not like having anxiety on a drug. Tantum paranoia is something beyond anxiety. I remember that the 3 of us put our backs to each other to go to the toilet because we were full of fear since we can't see our back. We don't know what we are scared of, but a strong fear was there and it will haunt us for the next 12 hours. 4 hours later, the effects start to peak and I was losing my sense of self. Because of the paranoia, I decided to put my back on the corner of the room and fold my legs to my chest and hug them. Suddenly, I feel a hand on my back and cold sweat rushing through my neck. I was amused by the light trails and shadows moving around the house, but also feeling a chaotic unknown fear. I was on a couch and my friend was on my right side, and he had a windowed balcony door on his right. I was gazing into the balcony and seeing someone sitting on the chair with his back against me. I was like, who the hell is this sitting on the balcony? and the person on the balcony turned his face to me and I was sweating cold again. But I soon realized it was just a reflection of my friend. 5 hours in, we had to drink a lot of fluids because of the cotton mouth. I was shifting in and out of consciousness and I wasn't able to tell if I was on something or if I was sober. I decided to chat with my friend. I don't really remember what it was about, but I remember the key parts. I was talking to him and he said, "Why did you stop? Go on, what happened after?" And then I said, "What are you talking about? I didn't say anything. What would you do?" He replied, "What would I do? What are you asking about?" I just said, "I forgot what I was talking about." He replied again, "You were not talking for the last half an hour, dude." I started to panic from the inside, thinking that I lost my mind and I couldn't relax. I was listening to music on the speakers and it was going 5 times faster and 5 times slower randomly. I wasn't able to follow the music. I wasn't able to tell how long it has been. We were just feeling anxious, depressed, and gazing on the walls. We were constantly checking around, thinking there was something behind us all the time. 6 to 8 hours in, the effects started to diminish and we were feeling like shit and exhausted. I wanted to sleep, but I couldn't. When I closed my eyes, I was having ayahuasca visuals, seeing faces or some spinning geometric spirals. 12 to 36 hours in, I didn't experience any hallucinations, but visual disturbance was still there. I kept seeing trails of moving objects and shadowy reflections around them. Up until this point, I didn't sleep at all, I couldn't eat, and my dick was like 5 times smaller. I couldn't take a shit either, and my eyes were bloodshot and had small brown spots under my feet. After years later, I still did some stupid drugs, mostly binge benzo use recently, but I won't do tantum even if you pay me. It is hallucinogenic, but it's not recreational at all. If it wasn't causing paranoia and sleeplessness, it would be awesome, but it is dangerous and a dumb way to get high. Now it's a prescription medicine and not popular at all. My 2 friends didn't suffer any long-term health effects, both physically and mentally. But me, I still suffer from constant anxiety. It is hard to relate this situation alone with tantum, but it might trigger what was hidden in me. It's nightmarish and not worth it. I boiled the Datura foliage in about 2.5 cups of water until it was black and smelled like a swamp. I poured it into 2 cups, half for now, half for later. I sipped it down in my room until it was gone and sat on my couch for about an hour. When I got up to take a piss, I realized I could not walk and staggered into the bathroom and urinated and staggered back out. I tried to go back to my room, but I ran into the wall and said, "Damn it," thinking it was not real, and I was upstairs in the hallway. I moved around the basement until someone woke up in my house and bitched and told me to go to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I was tripping mad balls and watched the tube for God knows how long. I went into the living room and some dumb chick gave me a fortune and I read it. It was the "Do Not Consume" sticker for my bag of Datura. I went into my room again and stared into space for a long time. I was smoking the last of my cigarettes. After I'd put them out, I thought I was still holding them, so when I brought them down for the final drag, they flew out of my hand and into nothing. I saw my friends Dan and Nate and decided to talk to them, and they said they were leaving to smoke weed. I did not realize it was Friday and my kids were at school, so I went into the living room again to get all of the kids back to the room. They all disappeared. I sat in my chair and noticed my covers were in fact a burn victim, so I stared at him for a while. And then I had an imaginary dinner from everyone at the house gathered around my desk. I left my room and sat on the steps and began to read an imaginary book, and when I looked at my strobe light, it became some random friends. I was still fucked up for 3 days afterward. Mindset, relaxed, no pressing concerns or anxiety. My mood I describe as my usual upbeat and contented feeling in that period of my life. The setting was my home at that time, so I felt comfortable and at ease. I was on my own and expecting no interruptions or people dropping around. It was 11 p.m. on a weekend, Saturday I think, and it was summertime, so the weather was warm, calm, and usual for this part of Australia at this time of year. To summarize, I felt safe and secure, no concerns, and comfortable. During that period of my life, I was not taking any other medications, supplements, or vitamins and had not for years prior. I was, however, a little bored, which may help explain why I decided it was a good idea to take 30 milligrams of scopolamine and 1,000 milligrams of diphenhydramine. In explaining my experience, it gets really challenging as the concept of time kinda lost any meaning to me. 1 second may as well have been 1 hour. The terms of time and the passing of time were absolutely meaningless to me at that point. Another difficulty in trying to describe my experience were the blackouts. There are periods that I cannot account for that I have zero recollection of. Therefore, rather than trying to guess what I may have done or felt during these blackout periods, I'll just type what I definitely know happened. So in these blackout periods, the only thing that I knew for certain was that I didn't know, thus I'll leave those periods blank. The scopolamine was in the form of 100 × 300 microgram tablets, and the DPH was in the form of 20 × 50 milligram gel caps. All are available over the counter in Australia at that time. I had not taken scopolamine or diphenhydramine for many years, and never in combination or at these doses, nor had I taken any other drug or supplement that day or month prior. I took the lot orally with water and sat in my recliner waiting to see what may happen. 15 minutes in, beginning to feel a haziness, like a wavy dullness within my consciousness, nothing crazy or alarming. 45 minutes in, the hazy feeling has intensified and is continuing to intensify at an accelerating rate, not feeling any alarm or concern. 60 minutes in, I could barely form a thought. My brain feels like it's wrapped in bubble wrap and I had to fight my way out to think or speak. I began feeling an urgent need to think about something, perhaps a thought like, where's my cell phone? I'd then stand up, and after taking 2 or 3 steps, I would wonder where it is I'm walking to and why the hell I am walking there in the first place. So I'd go back and sit down only to do the same thing all over again, and this repeated over and over. 75 minutes in, I could no longer form coherent thoughts whatsoever. It was like a jumbled mix of thoughts and words in my mind that made no sense. Yet somehow I felt there was something I urgently needed to do, but just couldn't remember what it was. It felt just like when one struggles to recall something and can't, yet it feels like it was on the tip of my tongue. I don't recall feelings like anxiety, fear, or alarm. In fact, I don't recall anything at all. Now, that didn't mean that I felt good, bad, or anything else. It means that the thought of feeling just didn't even enter my consciousness. Approximately 180 minutes in, it feels like I basically just arrived on the planet, as in just born, with no thought of before this moment even existing, why I should be where I am or what I'm trying to do. I came out of blackout walking down a highway, like literally as in 1 second there is nothing, then bam, here I am walking along a highway wearing nothing but board shorts and socks, no shoes. Even though I was likely just a mile or so from my house, I was completely lost both geographically and mentally. I walked aimlessly for what seemed like hours but could not find my home. I remember feeling sad, anxious, and hopeless that I could not find my way home, and for periods I recall thinking that this is forever and I will be lost forever. At this point, I was still unable to form coherent thoughts and felt very lost. For a while, I disappear back into the unconscious blackness and then reappear for a moment. Approximately 240 minutes in, I finally found my street, by accident, and then my home. I recall an overwhelming sense of, finally, I'm safe again. After this, I pretty much sat on the lounge and waited for the effects to wear off. Were there any hallucinations, auditory or visual? There were occasional wall-breathing visuals, but they were minor and intermittent. I don't recall any auditory hallucinations, though. There was no nausea or vomiting, no euphoria, no headaches, GI distress, or other symptoms experienced. I did, however, experience dry mouth, temporary urine retention, blurred vision, and confusion. Initially, I felt pronounced sedation, but either that wore off or I just forgot about it. All of these side effects are typical of anticholinergics, of which scopolamine and DPH are examples of. In essence, this is absolutely not something I would do again, nor would I recommend others to try out. If I were ever curious about what dementia might feel like from the perspective of the subject, then this, I imagine, would come close. It's the main reason I did it. All that being said, I'd still not recommend this combination to anyone.